So you've seen the videos on YouTube and you now want to get into the wonderful world of sim racing but don't know where to start. Well, this is the video for you because we're here to talk about how to do just that. We'll cover where to start, what hardware to buy, what order to buy it in, and what mistakes to avoid to save you a lot of money. And we'll also cover what sim titles are out there, and we'll go over what they are good at and what they are bad at. And I'll break this all down into bite-sized chunks to arm you with everything you need to have the engine fired up and out on track in no time. Anyway, enough of that, let's get into it. So sim racing's an amazing hobby to get into, whether you're an F1 racing driver like Max Verstappen or someone like me who just loves cars. Sim racing has something for everyone, whether that's drifting, driving in F1 cars, GT3 cars, rally cars, and everything else you can imagine. Only sim racing can transport you to tracks that exist today, tracks that once existed but have since been closed or destroyed, and fictitious tracks too. It can even transport you back in time and drive on versions of tracks from the past, like the track from Le Mans, just like it was in 1966. You can be driving in the winning 1966 Ford GT40 and with the exact same weather conditions as it was at that time at that race. The possibilities are endless and still blow my mind even today after sim racing for over 6 years. So where do we start? Well, in a word, budget. Sim racing can be really expensive and you can find yourself getting carried away like I did and even purchase kit you think you need but you don't ever use. You really need to think about the amount of time that you're actually going to be spending in this hobby initially and the budget that you have. From there, we can work out a plan of how much you want to spend. I've spent over £15,000 over the years, and if I could do it again today, I would do things differently. But to be quite honest, it's also been the best investment I've ever made, and it can be the same for you too. So set yourself a budget and let's try and stick to it. Now, for those first starting out, don't overlook the second-hand marketplace for everything we're about to discuss in this video. There are plenty of wheels, wheelbases, pedals and shifters all for sale at a really good price. And you can get yourself a great deal and save yourself a ton of cash while you work out if sim racing is really for you. And you'll find there's always something over time that you'll want to upgrade, and this is what the second-hand market is for. So before you hit that buy now button, let's start with the basics. If you want to skip through this video, I've added some chapters for you down below to help you find what you're looking for in a specific segment. So the first piece of the puzzle is working out what platform you want to sim race on, and luckily for you there are a few to select from. Platforms such as the Xbox, the PlayStation and of course the PC. Now this is important because some hardware may only support a particular platform, so it might only support the PlayStation or it might only support the Xbox or even just the PC. But the good news is there are products out there that support a few platforms. So if you're starting with a console and think you'll want to move to a PC later, then strategically purchasing the right hardware now will mean that you don't have to sell it or throw it in the bin later. Products like the Fanatec Gran Turismo DD works with the PC and the PlayStation. Their CSL Ready to Race McLaren Elite bundle works well with the PC and the Xbox. And the Moser R3 works with the PC and the Xbox also. Both Fanatec and Moser are leading vendors, but both come with great entry-level hardware that you can even upgrade at a later date too. Also, if you're just starting out, it makes sense to start with what you already have. Do you have a laptop or a PC lying around, or an Xbox or even a PlayStation? If you do, I'd recommend trying out sim racing on whatever you have. Some of the best players in the world race with the controller, so don't let not having a wheel and pedals put you off from starting. Now also bear in mind when choosing which platform you want to race on, this will also dictate what sim titles you can play. With the PC you have titles such as iRacing, Assetto Corsa, Assetto Corsa Competizione, AMS2, WRC, the F1 titles and many more. The PlayStation has titles like Gran Turismo and ACC and AC, but if you're going to be moving towards iRacing at a later time, then this is only supported on the PC. So these things go hand in hand for sure. And it's questions like these that will determine what you go with and where you should spend your hard-earned cash. If you aren't sure what you want to play, well, one of the best titles out there that is supported on all three platforms is the original Assetto Corsa. and it's still one of the best despite being almost 11 years old now. This is down to the great modding community that not only produce great cars and great tracks, but they bring other mods to the title. For example, a complete weather system with rain and snow, which was never originally supported in the title. If you want a sim title that has the greatest selection of cars from today and throughout history, and tracks that exist today, tracks that no longer exist today, and fictional tracks, and be able to go drifting, GT3 racing, F1 racing, or any other kind of racing, then Assetto Corsa is the title for you. Automobilista 2 is also an amazing game, and it's one of the best titles, if not the best, for VR. This is due to its game engine, which is just brilliantly optimized for VR. So if you think VR is your thing, or you want to try VR, you're going to want to try Automobilista 2. If you just love GT3 or GT4 cars, then you can't go wrong with Assetto Corsa Competizione, but this isn't a great title for VR. In fact, it is probably the worst. If you just want Formula 1, then the F1 titles from Codemasters could be a great choice for you. If you want to try endurance racing, then the upcoming Le Mans Ultimate is another great title to choose. Whatever you choose to drive, you need to bear this in mind with what platform you can play these titles on. Now there's deals to be had on sim titles as well. Steam often puts games on sale, so keep an eye out for those. But places like Humble Bundle quite often put a whole sim title package together where you can buy 5 or 6 sim racing titles for a really low price. This is a great way to dip your toes into the world of sim racing for a really small price. So definitely keep an eye out on those as well. Links to everything I mentioned in this video will be down in the description. When it comes to budget as well, if you want to build yourself a nice decent PC, you can easily spend well over £1,000 or £2,000. So you can see why a lot of people decide to go the console route initially and save so much money when starting out. Now the next thing you want to think about other than the platform is whether you want to race using a controller or a wheel initially. Now you're probably asking, why on earth would I want to race with a controller? And that is a really good question. There are actually really competitive drivers out there in the world that use a controller and are really quick. There are even drivers who use controllers that have won esports competitions too. So don't be afraid to use a controller to just dip your toes into the world of sim racing and see if it's something that you want to invest more time and more money into. Now let's say you've done your research, you've played enough racing games and you're ready to dive in and get your first wheel. Well, this is where we're going to need to do some research to see which one is going to be compatible with what you have and what's going to fit your racing needs. It may even be better and more cost effective to get yourself a bundle, but more on that later. So if you've decided to take the next step and you want to actually get into sim racing, well, the very first thing you're going to look at is the wheelbase. Now there are 2 different types of wheelbases that you can get. There are belt-driven wheelbases and there are direct drive wheelbases. And the differences between the two primarily lie in their mechanism of forced feedback transmission from the motor in the wheelbase to the steering wheel, and this significantly affects the driving experience in sim racing setups. A belt-driven wheelbase uses 1 or more belts to connect the motor to the steering wheel. The motor rotates the belt, which in turn rotates the wheel. Whilst they're still good, the force feedback is generally considered to be less precise than direct drive systems. This is because the belts can introduce a slight delay and a dampening effect of the force feedback. However, modern belt-driven systems have significantly improved and can offer a very immersive experience. But the downsides are that the belts and the pulleys can wear over time and might need to be replaced. With a direct drive wheelbase, the steering wheel is directly mounted to the motor shaft, and this means there is no intermediary gear or belt, and as a result the force feedback from the sim racing game is transmitted directly to your steering wheel. The force feedback is more precise and detailed because there's just no loss of energy through any belts or gears. Players can even feel the smallest details, such as the texture of the road or the tyres losing grip, and they're generally more durable since there are fewer moving parts that can wear out over time. Now, I don't recommend anyone buy a belt-driven wheelbase today simply because there are a lot of companies that have made budget-friendly direct drive wheelbases over recent years, so it's become a lot more affordable. When I started back in 2019 to get yourself a direct drive wheelbase, it would cost you way above £1,000. Those days are long gone. Now, not all direct drive wheelbases are made equal. The differences lie in the amount of force feedback they output, and this is measured in something called Newton meters. Direct drive wheelbases can range anywhere from 3 Newton meters all the way up to, I've seen 30 Newton meters. The higher this figure, typically the higher the price. So do you need 30 Newton meters of torque? Well, absolutely not. A GT3 car which has powered steering has around 12 Newton meters of sustained torque. I have a Fanatec DD2 which can output up to 25 Newton meters of torque, but I have this dialed right down, most of the time below 50%. I would say a great entry-level wheelbase would be the Fanatec CSL DD, which comes with 5 Newton meters of torque as standard for a price of €349. But if you find later on this isn't enough, then this can be upgraded to 8 Newton meters with the Boost Kit 180 for a really small price of €149. Another great entry-level alternative is the Moser R5, which for €299 outputs 5.5 Newton meters of torque. Now, if you're starting out and you don't have a wheel and pedal set and you can't afford a brand new budget-friendly direct drive wheelbase, then definitely check out the second-hand market, as I said. Either way, try and get the best you can for the money that you have, but be sure to check what it's compatible with. Next up is your wheel, and this is the main star of the show, as this is going to be what connects your hands to the car that you're driving. It needs to feel good, it needs to be sturdy enough to handle the force feedback outputted from the wheelbase, so no flex, and it needs to look good as well. Now, what type of wheel you'll get will also be dependent on what types of driving you're doing. If it's mostly F1, then a nice looking F1 style wheel would be a good choice. If you're mostly drifting, then it's going to be a full circular wheel, allowing you to quickly grab and turn the wheel as you control the car. A nice all-rounder is something like Fanatec's McLaren GT3 wheel, which is currently priced at €199, and this is my go-to wheel for anything I drive that's not F1. Keep in mind though that if you begin to mix and match wheels and wheelbases, that you need to check what level of compatibility there is before making any purchases. There's been a lot of openness between vendors of late making their platforms compatible with others, but just be sure to do your homework. Next, we're going to look at pedals, which are arguably the most important piece of equipment you'll get that can actually make a difference in your consistency and in your lap times. They can help make up the majority of your lap time or lose the majority. Now, before we get into the types of pedals available, consider what types of cars you might want to drive. Why am I asking this? Well, quite simply, if all you want to drive, at least initially, are F1 cars or GT cars, so cars where the paddles on the steering wheel are used to change the gears, well, you could save yourself a good chunk of money buying yourself a 2-pedal set. And this is the exact reason why a lot of the big names offer a 2 or 3 pedal set and an upgrade to a clutch pedal should you want it later on down the line. I bought the Fanatec V3 pedal set and I have never used the clutch pedal, so I wasted a lot of money there. So on to the types of pedals available. Well, there are potentiometer pedals, load cell pedals and hydraulic pedals. So potentiometer based pedals are usually found in entry level setups, whilst the higher spec setups will usually have load cell style pedals. Potentiometers are generally found on entry-level sim setups. They are easier and quicker to manufacture, which makes them a lot less expensive. So the potentiometer is a device that measures the distance that the pedal travels and turns this distance into an electrical signal. The signal is picked up by the game and the relative braking force is applied to the in-game car. The system itself works very well and provides a really good starting point for beginner drivers, but the amount of feel and progression through the pedal is reduced and therefore it's not recommended if you're thinking about becoming a serious driver. Next up is load cell pedals, and a load cell measures the direct force that's applied to the pedal and turns this into an electrical signal which is picked up by the game. A load cell pedal still moves the same way when pressed, however, but there's a more realistic resistance pushing back on your foot. Load cell pedals tend to be more accurate as they produce signals at a higher frequency than that of the potentiometer pedals, and this means that the inputs to the pedal are more sensitive and more accurate, which improves immersion and performance. Another key benefit to load cell pedals is that the amount of customization is higher. the depth of travel, the pressure, the resistance can all be modified and adjusted. Products such as Fanatec's CSL load cell pedals are a good choice, starting at €199, and Moser's SRP pedal set will cost you around €190. And finally, hydraulic pedals, and these work very similarly to load cell pedals, but they use a hydraulic reservoir containing fluid that mimics that of a real-world pedal. The main benefits of using a hydraulic is the level of customization and its realistic feel. And if you're looking for a more top-end feel, then the Huixenveld Sim Pedal Ultimates are a surefire choice, but they're not cheap, coming in around €1,300 for a 3-pedal set. So we've talked platforms, we've talked wheelbases, wheels and pedals, so let's now talk about saving some big money. So I'm talking about bundles. I'm talking a wheel, a wheelbase and a pedal bundle, and here's where you can save big time. Fanatec offer what they call ready-to-race bundles, and you can pick up a CSL DD 5Nm wheelbase, the 2-pedal CSL set, so throttle and brake pedal, and the CSL steering wheel P1 V2, all for €399. Now when you bear in mind that just the wheelbase, the CSL DD 5Nm wheelbase, is €349 on its own, that's a massive saving. And the same can be said for Moser too. Their Moser R5 bundle comes with the R5 wheelbase, the SRP Lite 2-pedal set and the ES steering wheel, all for €459. The R5 wheelbase alone would cost you €300, the ES steering wheel another €130, so with those two alone that's already €430. So essentially for €30 more you're getting a 2-pedal set too. So once you've decided what type of wheelbase, what type of wheel and pedals you're going to be using, this is when it gets to the fun part. This is where we start looking at what sim rig to buy. Now when it comes to sim rigs you have a couple of options. You have foldable options for the more budget friendly wheels and pedals you're going to be using, and because they're foldable this does make them easy to store. So if space is a big issue for you, then this might be your option. But because they're foldable they aren't as rigid as some of the other types, so before you buy a rig just make sure that it will cope with the strength of whatever wheelbase you're going to get. Now if you wanted something that's fixed in position so you can easily jump in and out, or you've decided on a much higher end wheel and wheelbase and pedals and you need something that's rigid and doesn't flex, you might want to go with something that's a little bit more higher in the budget space. One company I can highly recommend is Track Racer. They have a great selection of sim rigs available, and the original rig I purchased from them is still the one I use today, and I have no issues or concerns about it flexing at all. And you really don't want any flexing in your sim rig at all, because as you're driving and you're pushing hard on that brake pedal and getting back on the throttle, you don't want any movement in your sim rig, because that's going to make things a little inaccurate. You're not going to be able to hit your brake markers every single time at the same amount of pressure applied to the brake. And so if you want to get more and more serious into sim racing, you need to understand how the sim rig's going to behave every single time. Now on to the very last piece of the sim racing puzzle, and that's monitors or VR. There are typically 3 configurations in this space. There's a single screen, there are triple screens, or VR. Personally, I've been hooked on VR ever since I started over 6 years ago, and nothing else comes close for me, but more on that in a second. A single screen can be anything from a single 27-inch screen if you're on a budget to an ultra-wide if you have the cash. The ultra-wides are becoming super popular now with the launch of the Samsung 47-inch and now the 57-inch ultra-wide Odyssey G9. This is an absolute beast, but at over £2,000 it's not cheap. Triples would be a lot cheaper than the Samsung Odyssey G9 for sure, and if this is a configuration that appeals to you, then I'd recommend getting 3 monitors that can handle 1080p with a refresh rate of at least 144 Hz. This should be the best setup and not eat too much resources from your GPU. Now if you want to be as immersed as you can to where you feel like you're sitting in the actual car, then VR is the only option. And with the Quest 3 or even the Quest 2 becoming very, very affordable, you can't go wrong. I have the Quest 3 and it's amazing for sim racing. I originally had the Valve Index, which wasn't cheap at all. It was well over £1,500 when I bought it. The 128 gig version of the Quest 3 is more than enough if all you use it for is sim racing, and the price comes in at around $479. Now if you want to get into VR and you're thinking about buying a Quest 3 and you think you might use it for standalone games, so not just sim racing, then you might find you might have to go bigger than the 128 gig version. But if all you're using it for is sim racing, the 128 gig is more than enough. And after all of this, if you want to take your sim racing experience to the next level, check out the video that's on screen right now, which is the top 10 sim racing apps every sim racer needs. Catch you in the next one.